Hi everyone, this is audapostrophe. Let's continue our game of anonymous code running on Nintendo Switch.
Speak. Where is Lucia?
Not telling.
I could barely breathe, but he had no intention of letting me go. That filthy, half-rotted hand still had a lot of strength. I didn't have the energy to resist. My consciousness was fading.
Hang on.
Let him go!
I saw Bombi. She was holding a gun. It wasn't a real handgun. It was a stun gun that incapacitated targets with an electric charge. Davide turned around. He glanced at her gun. The grip on my neck loosened. Bombi faced the huge, rotting man. It didn't seem to faze her that she was up against someone who'd come back from the dead.
It's an officer's job to protect smiles. They've got to sparkle like idols do. Your methods aren't righteous at all. I'd rather quit the police than work with the Holy Office.
You ignored my warning. How foolish.
Davide reached out with his heated hand. His target was the shotgun. Bombi pulled the trigger immediately. Electrode needles launched out and embedded into his body. Electricity coursed through him as he fell to his knees.
Bastard!
I punched his arm as hard as I could in an attempt to finally get him off me. The flesh tore from his arm, exposing something that looked like bone. But he wasn't bleeding. The stink of rot simply grew stronger.
Well,
Deep and heinous emotions whirled in his eyes.
Pollon, run!
stop her. Yes, sir.
Obeying the order, the FAD officers tried to restrain Bombi.
She never thinks of the consequences, does she? Guess we've got no choice but to follow suit. Iroha, let's help Bombi. Yeah.
Bombi's actions had turned the situation on its head. The conflict was between the officers themselves now. That was a close one. I didn't have much time to enjoy the relief, though. Davide recovered from the shock and stood back up. The part of the flesh embedded with electrodes had just crumbled off his body. That was just plain nasty.
You will not escape me. Well,
There were so few things I could hack that I was basically powerless. That was why I'd called the Graper I'd parked nearby. While I had the chance, I'd move to a place where I had the advantage. I didn't have a plan in mind, but I was out of options. And then I saw it. My ride drove up to me, weaving through the onlookers. I jumped on the Graper in front.
Attention, douchebags! Yeah, you, the cross-wielding zombie and his handler. I'm about to get away. Better come after me.
after him.
At once.
They both rushed to their police car, all according to plan. I made a sharp turn on my Graper and sped away. As I left, I saw the FAD officers restraining Bombi. She'd always told me to respect the law, but she'd broken it to save my life. I owed her big time. At the abandoned building next to the egg tower, sat Cross and Wind, watching what was happening at the helipad.
Neither infrared nor close-range radio works, huh? I wanted to hack into their BMI and get the details on this pool hack, but I didn't think there was no way to connect to them remotely.
So, without a wired connection, you can't determine the virus and stuff?
Yeah. I'm guessing the virus switches the BMI to offline mode when it's infected. Probably just to make the quest more difficult.
Eesh, that cicada's a real piece of work.
I guess I'll stick to it. See what else I can find.
Okay, and I'll help.
They looked over at the helipad through their BMI. Analyzing it for infrared and ultraviolet, invisible to the naked eye, they zoomed in on the crowd, watching it as if through binoculars.
You found something?
Caught some light. This is... Li-Fi.
I think I've heard of that somewhere.
It's a comms method that uses LED lights. It doesn't even need to be bright enough for humans to see, though. I wouldn't have noticed it without BMI.
So those people aren't completely offline.
But Li-Fi is short range, and it can't go through walls. We still need to go to the helipad if we want to do any hacking.
Couldn't you connect through a drone?
That's not a bad idea. But this quest would be too easy if all you needed to beat it was a drone. The Li-Fi's gotta be open for some special reason.
Special... a special one. By the way, this was the first time there were 2 cicadas, right?
Cicadas?
I'm talking about Cicada 3301's post. You know how there's usually a picture of a cicada? There were 2 cicadas this time.
Wait. Does that mean there's a collaborator in this quest?
What?
Someone using Li-Fi to control those people would explain why the Li-Fi's open. It's not a
It's not a virus this time.
So, he's gonna make them commit suicide manually? But then, what's the point of the countdown?
Same reason he killed the Wi-Fi. To make the quest more difficult. These people are going to commit suicide whether you act or not. So how are you going to handle it? That might be the challenge this time.
Once we crawled out from below the crater, we felt the pale light of the moon washing over us. It felt so far removed from the red candlelight of the room we'd come from. We'd seen Kent Kodahisa sleeping under that warm light.
Is it really him?
My instincts told me that it really was his body, but maybe Rosario was right. Maybe it was a fake that Gino had set up to demoralize us. And the quest arranged by Cicada 3301, Kent Kodahisa's other name, was still underway.
Rosario, let's go help with the quest. If we meet with Cicada, we should learn the truth about his death.
You're right. Let's go.
I noticed that I'd received a message on my BMI.
This is...
I heard footsteps somewhere nearby, and when I turned in the direction the sounds were coming from, I saw a hooded man walking over to us. The moment I noticed the crosses on his collar and sleeves, my mind was overcome with anxiety.
There you are, Lucia.
Are you...
Before I could finish, he nodded.
Ronin del Cielo. Agent of 513.
And introduced himself.
He's dangerous.
You know him?
I've heard a lot of rumors. I don't know if he's on Davide's level, or even stronger, but he's...
A really powerful agent.
All they'd done was say the same thing at the same time, but something felt off about it. Maybe he simply guessed what Rosario was going to say, but for some reason he seemed dangerous. Rosario suddenly pointed her gun at him.
Don't worry, this won't even be a fight. I won't waste time. I'll beat...
You can't hope to beat me.
The moment Ronan cut off Rosario's words, he closed the distance between them. Rosario opened fire without a moment's hesitation. However,
Missed?
he'd only been walking in a straight line, but the shot missed him.
How?
A second gunshot. A split second before Rosario fired, Ronan had hit her gun with his palm, knocking it downwards. The bullet she fired hit the top of her own foot. Almost subconsciously, I activated Nono's gadget and threw it at the ground. It was close enough to harm us too, but we were in a desperate situation. Ronan backed away as if he knew how dangerous the gadget was. He moved outside the range of the electromagnetic interference, which meant...
Rosario!
I took Rosario's hand and started running. We slipped between the rubble and made our way out of the crater. I turned around for a moment and saw Ronan's face lit by the moonlight. He was looking right at us. He didn't seem to be in a hurry at all. He simply watched as we ran away. It was awfully unsettling. I drove around on my Graper, looking for somewhere I could find Davide. Or I could fight Davide. That was when I got a call from Momo.
We cracked the final code!
Her breathing was ragged. She must have been running.
What happened? Did you figure anything out?
We found Kent Kodahisa's dead body.
I struggled to make sense of what I was hearing. Kent Kotohisa's dead body? Dead body?
Juno said he died during the sad morning.
What the hell? If that's true, then what's the deal with Cicada?
Who was the one behind the quests?
I don't know if the body is real or not. We need to do the quest to find out.
Momo, now's not the time to be chatting.
I heard Rosario's voice on the other end.
Hey, what's going on over there?
We're being chased by an agent.
Davide went after you?
Davide? Davide's alive?
Yeah, I saw him just now. They used a sacrament to bring him back.
The agent after us is a new one. He's called Ronan. And Rosario is hurt.
Think you can handle him?
I was completely powerless against him. Maybe I could do something if I knew what his sacrament was.
He evaded the gadget.
I used GPS to find their current location. They were near the Aksak crater. Was helping them an option, though? We had about 25 minutes left, and I had to deal with both Juno and Davide.
Try and hang in there until I'm done with the quest. That's not the point.
I hung up and focused on what I had to do. First, there was Davide.
Oh yeah.
I remember the time Oz almost ran over Juno. We crashed into a construction site in the crater after that. And that site had electricity, which meant if I were there, I could do some hacking. Ronan Del Cielo followed Rosario's bloodstains to where she was hiding with Momo. He examined the ground, tracing the red flecks across the ground. Rosario was roughly 10 meters ahead, fighting the pain. Ronan walked up to her.
Where is Lucia?
I'm not going to tell you a thing!
Ignoring her wound, she swung her leg towards Ronan. As her foot flew through the air, a blade shot out of the tip of her shoe. It sliced through the air on its way to Ronan's throat, but missed. His expression unchanged, Ronan evaded the kick, then took a step forward to bring his face up to Rosario's. He was so close she could feel his breath on her skin. Before she knew what was happening, the gun had appeared suddenly in Ronan's hand and was being held to her chin.
You can't defeat me.
Noticing something, Ronan pushed Rosario aside. The next moment, 4 armed security drones were flying towards them.
They made it.
I hid in the bushes and watched as the 4 security drones arrived. Rosario couldn't run further with her energy. She told me to get away, but I refused. I chose to fight Ronan instead.
I think Ronan's attacks are based on the blind spots in our thoughts. He's not physically fit like Davide, but his moves take advantage of our oversights, so he can hit us where it hurts.
You think that's his sacrament?
Yes. My guess is that his power is a kind of telepathy. He reacts to our thoughts.
That sounds powerful.
But I know a way to deal with him.
Looking at the 4 drones, Rosario grinned.
They made it.
This was her idea, drone warfare. If Ronan's actions were a response to his opponent's thoughts, his own blind spot must have been machines. They didn't have thoughts at all. Working under this assumption, Rosario sent me a hacking program so I could take control of the drones. They were equipped with wires for restraining intruders.
Ronan del Cielo, we're going to stop you with...
With these drones.
So, that's your strategy? The drones surrounded Ronan. Poised to attack, they aimed their weapons at him. Ronan took a few small steps, but didn't run away. He may have realized that he no longer could. The next moment, the drone shot restraining wires at him. With a sharp sound, the wires flew through the air. The unbelievable occurred. The drone wires passed right by Ronan and entangled the propellers of the drones. They were opposite. All 4 of them plummeted to the ground. Their propellers smoking and they couldn't remain airborne. But Ronan was completely unharmed.
How?
Was it those steps he took? He hadn't moved because he was cornered. He was simply adjusting his position so the drones would fire at each other.
Momo, run!
A gunshot. The next moment, Rosario collapsed. This reminded me of what I'd seen at the Nakano Broadway. Rosario was bleeding from the head. He'd killed her. Oh, really? Oh, damn. Really like Rosario. After arriving at Shinjuku's crater reconstruction site, I'd hid behind a bulldozer in preparation for my fight with Davide. There were no workers in sight, probably because it was New Year's Eve. This was good for me. It meant I didn't have to hold back.
Hold on! I figured out Juno's secret!
Huh? Miss Lid?
I listened to her explanation as I watched for Davide and his handler to show up.
The trick to Juno's disappearing and reappearing, no, her warping, is actually quantum teleportation!
Huh? You mean like the stuff you see in sci-fi movies and anime?
Yes, it's a method of transportation using quantum entanglement. It's considered theoretically possible, but no person had ever traveled that way. The best researchers could do was send information. Juno must be a true genius.
So, how do we deal with her?
You'd need a pretty large device to pull off quantum teleportation, but I never saw her near anything like that. That leaves only one possibility. She's using the same thing as quantum communication.
Meaning...
A satellite. If you can disrupt her communication with the satellite, you should be able to prevent her from using quantum teleportation.
Ah, Miss Lid, you're the GOAT!
Thanks to her, I knew how to take care of Juno and make it to the helipad. A police car suddenly pulled into the area. I was out of sight, so they couldn't find me right away. In fact, I left a little surprise for them.
Gotcha now.
The car was heading towards the prefab in front of the entrance. With its door slightly open and its lights on, someone was visible inside. That someone was an AR image of me. I didn't know if the Holy Office peeps had their AR on or not, but I did whatever I could to grab their attention. I figured they wouldn't go in since it was so obviously a trap, but that didn't matter to me. They only had to get close enough to... The car suddenly accelerated, speeding straight at the prefab. Flames rose from the car and spread to the prefab.
How did this happen?
None of these events made any sense to me.
Is this for real?
I only planned to drop a steel frame on them when they got near the prefab, but that wasn't even necessary. All my prep was for nothing.
Wait.
The car's passenger door opened. The one who climbed out was Davide, and in his hand was the man in the priest's clothing. He'd been burned to a smoldering mass. A normal car fire couldn't have done that to him so quickly. That left only one possibility. Davide killed him. Davide laughed as he walked out of the prefab. His body was both rotten and burned. The flesh of his left hand had fallen off, exposing the bone.
No one can hinder me now. Come on, heathen. Time to bear the yoke of hell.
A crane hung right over the prefab. I ran a program to trigger it, dropping the steel beams it was holding. But moments before that... The giant cross on David's back let loose a blinding light. It shimmered gold, emanating a strange and saintly vibe. A moment later, the light engulfed Davide himself. Then I realized it wasn't a light at all.
Fire?
Well, when I realized, the beams fell on him. But his fire melted through the steel beams. Bathed in the searing flames that cloaked Davide's body, they were reduced to liquid in a matter of moments.
Is his sacrament more powerful somehow?
I was more than 10 meters away from him, but it felt insanely hot. This was way more intense than the heat I'd felt back at Broadway. Davide dropped the priest's remains. and fire began to spread all around him.
What?
The fire spread so fast it was like the ground was coated in gasoline. Before long, the whole site was aflame.
I'll do what I can first.
Why didn't anyone tell me he could do that?
Okay, next move.
I turned on the engines of the heavy machinery I'd hacked. The 5 vehicles parked around the prefab turned their headlights and lurched forward. Their huge treads and tires spun at full speed, hauling their hulky frames ahead. Their target was Davide. But then,
No!
the tires and treads started melting away, and in just a few seconds the vehicles came to a complete standstill.
Bad news, Pollon. An agent's got the little lady.
What? What about Rosario?
No idea. Don't know if she's even breathing.
Shit!
There you are. Well,
Our eyes met. He smiled as he took the large cross in hand.
What's he gonna do? Yeah, good call.
Before anything else could happen, I hovered over the save data. I contacted Momo and Rosario as I watched the police car head for the prefab.
What's the situation there?
Rosario can't run any further, so we're gonna stay and fight Ronan.
I have an idea of what his sacrament might be. I think we'll manage.
No, don't try anything. Just run away.
Rosario's too injured for that.
If you try to fight Ronan, the agents will catch you. Your plan isn't gonna work. Leave Rosario and get out of there. You're the one the agents want. Rosario might actually be safer if you go.
But
That was when the police car crashed into the prefab and caught fire.
Momo, change the future.
I ended the call and ran the program immediately. The crane dropped the steel beams it was holding. This time around, my plan was wrap things up before Davide had the chance to get serious.
I'm not done yet.
I powered on the engines of the heavy machinery and had them all surge forward. Their target was the burning prefab. A dump truck, an excavator, a loader, a bulldozer, and a roller. The 5 of them crushed the tiny prefab. The vehicle suddenly exploded. The smoke billowing from the flames was so thick it could blot out a small high-rise. The fire from the prefab must have set them all alight. I didn't think Davide could have survived the chaos, but I had to be sure. For a while I just stood there and watched out for him.
What?
I heard a sound. By the time I realized it was police sirens, several police cars had driven on site. They stopped near me, and out of them stepped...
Shit! It's Foreign Affairs!
It looked like the people who arrested Bombi had called their peeps. At the moment, both the Holy Office 513 and the TMPD were our enemies. That meant taking Davide down wouldn't be the end of this. The countdown to the suicide was getting closer and closer to 0, but it didn't look like going to the egg tower was an option yet. After hearing Pollon's words, and with some begging from Rosario, I'd finally decided to run away by myself. I had to convince myself that Rosario would be safe without me.
Momo, look.
Rosario sent me a recording that showed Ronan.
You can't defeat me.
Though his face had remained calm and collected, Ronan's face suddenly hardened. Next, he distanced himself from Rosario and walked away as though he was afraid.
What did you do to him?
Nothing. He was the one who cornered me. I couldn't even touch him. I couldn't do anything. But he got agitated and left.
I couldn't do anything. Those words stood out to me. After all,
We acted differently.
What?
hold on a minute.
We listened to Pollon after he loaded, and acted differently from before. What if that affected Ronan somehow?
Then his sacrament must be...
I'd come to the underground part of Shinjuku Station to get away from the police. I couldn't see them, but I could hear their footsteps everywhere.
Hold on! We figured out Ronin's sacrament!
Huh? Didn't you run away?
It's because we ran away that we managed to figure out his sacrament. Because we listened to you after you loaded. Maybe it's not really a sacrament after all, though.
What do you mean?
He probably acts based on predictions made by the Vatican's Earth simulator.
Predictions? You mean the thing Rosario was talking about?
She told us that they use security cams and stats to analyze and simulate Momo's behavior.
Rosario said the predictions were imprecise, but he can still use them to his advantage. When you load and mess up those predictions, though, you can defeat Ronin.
Pollon, we figured out what the pool hack's all about. Someone else is in on it this time.
You... what? He's not working alone?
I'd never heard of Cicada working with an accomplice. Unless he was just using someone again? Like he'd used Lime Nuki for the high hack?
We found out that they're using Li-Fi. It's short range, so chances are the perp's in there among the victims.
Oh, I get it. Do you know who it is?
I tried checking the security footage in and around Nishi Shinjuku, but no luck. Sorry.
The first victims are probably a group of 10 or so that stopped at a certain traffic light. Hard to pick out our perp in that crowd, though.
So, how do we complete this quest?
I asked as I looked around for a place to hide.
I have an idea, but we'd need more than the 10 minutes we have left for it.
I'll just load then.
I knew you'd say that. I really don't want you abusing it like this.
You'd rather abandon all those people? Just tell me your idea.
I heard him let out a sigh.
We join the Li-Fi network. Become a part of the pool hack. Willingly.
You serious?
If we join the Li-Fi network, we can use an app called Argos to visualize the connections to the perp. Getting the app should be easy too. If we have someone in the Li-Fi network, someone to check the visualization app, and a few people to restrain the perp, we should be set. The only concern will be the time we'll lose by turning off the BMI.
What do you mean?
The perp's gonna know right away if someone joins the network, meaning we have to get onto the helipad before we find him through the app.
So the people on the perp restraining task are gonna have to sneak onto the helipad first.
With their BMI off, to avoid getting forced into the Li-Fi network like everyone else.
Ah, I see. We'll lose time because it'll be harder to communicate.
And if we mess around too much, the perp's just gonna run the suicide command. And then it'll all be over.
Right.
Whoever was on the helipad would be waiting with their BMI off. That meant they couldn't know when the perp was found or when to act. I know everyone's going to be tense, but they'd still be real vigilant. But there was no guarantee we'd all stay in sync. The footsteps were getting closer. I hung up and ran as fast as I could. The stars over Shinjuku shone through the gaps in the ceiling above. They reminded me of the scenery around the egg tower. Next I thought of the roads I'd driven on as I looked for somewhere to fight Davide. Then the crater surroundings. And finally, Shinjuku's night skyline.
That reminds me.
I remembered the road I'd taken to the construction site.
I saw this clock.
I felt like I could use it as a signal. If we put the plan into action when the hour hand was over the minute hand, we could sync up even without our BMI. That would save some time. But the MTT building was sealed off. It had been at risk of collapse since the sad morning. One of us would have to go there and move the clock.
I finally see it.
Juno, the agents, the second pool hack. I thought they were all massive problems we'd struggle to sort out. But the situation had changed. My friends had turned it all around. We had about 10 minutes left until the countdown ended. What could we do now? How could we solve all these problems? I had to think. Which path would lead us to victory?
Huh?
I heard a gunshot and felt the pain in my gut. Looking down, I realized I was bleeding from the pit of my stomach. I turned around to see the officers in the distance. And then I collapsed right where I stood. Solution number 12. Even if you found the solution to the problem, it's a bit late to implement it. Might be wise to load and head towards a more favorable outcome. Ah, interesting.
Hold on!
Huh?
It's baby.
What do you...
You... Rosario, you...
Hold,
You...
we found, I tried
The first... So,
I haven't,
I'll just...
I knew
You'd rather...
we join, we come up,
You...
if we have, the
What do you mean?
perps,
So...
with,
Ah,
and if,
right. That reminds... I saw that... I finally...
Hold on! Run!
Things went pretty well this time around, but a lot of lives are on the line here. I need to bet it all on acing the next load. This time I'm going to do everything perfectly. I came back to right after we got the egg hint.
Listen up! The new quest is actually a second pool hack.
That was the first thing I said to Cross and Wind.
Huh? Pool hack? You mean like the quest last year? Oh yeah! That was on New Year's Eve too.
the scenery intercept one, right?
Wait, how do you know that?
I cheated a bit.
What?
You got the deets?
There might be a perp this time. He used Li-Fi to pull off another pool hack. He's got 50 people standing on the Egg Tower's helipad.
Egg Tower? The one in Shinjuku? Egg Tower? The one in Shinjuku? Oh! So that's why the hint was egg!
If the perp's one of those people, we should check the security cams in the area to figure out who it is.
No, that didn't work. That's why someone has to go to the helipad and connect to the Li-Fi network. Then someone else has to use Argos.
So it's gonna be a group effort.
Yeah, plus someone to restrain the perp. We're gonna need 4 people in total.
That's a decent plan. The problem is...
We're gonna lose time if we turn off our BMI, right?
Everything I said so far was something we talked about last time, but now I was going to add something new to the mix.
We can use the MTT building.
What?
If we start the op the moment the hands of the clock overlap, everyone should be in sync. That ought to minimize the lag between us.
An analog clock could work as a signal the perp wouldn't notice, but the clock's dead.
And there's rubble on the dial.
Wind, You go clear the rubble and get the clock working.
What? Me?
Cross has to use the Argos app, and I got a bunch of stuff to take care of too.
Like Juno and the agents.
Come on, man, you're the only one I can count on for this.
All right, I'll do it.
Never thought an analog clock would end up part of the strategy. But hey, Operation Analog. I like that.
Now we just had to decide who was going to go to the helipad.
Pollon, run!
Oh yeah, the CCO.
Oz, I need your help.
I told him about the TMPD cooperating with the Holy Office 513.
I want you to talk to some big shot, like the Superintendent General, and get him to scrap their arrangement with the Holy Office.
You're asking too much of me here, kid.
I know it won't be easy, but people's lives are in danger. Try and work something out for me, will ya?
I hung up on Oz, then got in touch with Momo and Rosario.
Forget about Juno's code and come to the egg tower.
Huh? Did something happen?
An agent's coming after you. His name's Ronan.
Ronan's coming?
Yeah, but we can handle him. That's why I want you to meet up with me and help out.
All right, we'll be there soon.
I didn't mention that Kent Kodahisa might be dead. That was important, but lives were at stake right now. We had to complete the quest first. Wind and I rode together until we had to split up. He went to the MTT building, while I went to the egg tower. I was there earlier than last time. There were some officers around, but no media people or curious onlookers. Momo left out of the car Rosario was driving, then ran up to me. Rosario joined her moments later.
How are we going to beat the agents?
We're gonna head underground and sneak into the egg tower.
So we can ambush them?
Yeah, but before that, we're gonna take Juno down.
What?
She was waiting at the entrance, just like last time.
Juno.
What are you two doing here? What about my code? Weren't you going to prove your love for Kent?
I found something more important.
You failure. So you're not even cut out to be a stalker? You've no right to participate in the quests!
I don't need a right to participate.
Oh my! I've never heard trash speak its mind before.
You done talking, Juno? Sorry, but it's time you took off.
Excuse me?
We're taking you down, and we're completing the quest.
You can't do that. Where is all this confidence coming from?
Quantum teleportation. I know all your tricks.
You're dead.
The moment she spoke, I activated my berry blocky.
She disappeared?
Momo and Rosario looked around, searching for Juno. Without moving an inch, I waited for the right moment. I felt something touch my shoulder. But the scenery didn't change at all. I spun around and reached for her carrier node. She twisted her body and evaded me. But then, Momo darted behind Juno and snatched her carrier node.
I'll be taking that.
No! Oh, what sick joke are you playing? This is not supposed to happen! You fucking vermin!
Juno's eyes seemed to change color as she charged at Momo.
Not so fast!
Rosario smashed her with a roundhouse kick. Juno's body flew through the air and collided with one of the entrance pillars. She slid down it and collapsed on the floor. She was completely still, her face pale.
Did you kill her?
No, just knocked her out.
Seeing an agent of the church showing off her skills actually kind of scared me.
Hold on, are you sure that using Nanno's gadget was the right idea? We still have mine, but weren't they meant to stop the agents?
The gadgets didn't really work on the agents, which figures. Don't worry, though. I already have an idea of how to beat them.
Hey, you got 2 agents heading your way. And you won't believe this, but one of them's...
Davide, right? The guy who's supposed to be dead? I have a plan. You just keep working with the TMPD, okay?
Okay. I saved right here and took my keyboard out of my pocket. Seconds later, I was using it to hack the building systems.
Rosario, we gotta discuss the plan. There they are.
A few minutes had passed since Oz's warning. The agents came in through the front entrance.
The information we got was right.
A guy in a hood and another guy who's rotting away. Davide's handler was nowhere to be seen. Lucky him.
They sent 2 of their most powerful agents. 513 must be quaking in their boots.
Though Rosario's words were optimistically dry, her eyes didn't seem half as cheery. She probably understood better than anyone the skill gap between herself and the other 2 agents.
This plan of mine is centered around my loading. I'm sorry, but you're gonna have to lose at least once.
Of course, by loading I could erase that defeat from history. But that didn't change the fact that Rosario was going to get hurt.
I swore an oath that I'd give my life to save the world. If it helps us win, I'll do whatever you need me to.
She showed herself to them. I stayed hidden behind a pillar. Momo's hiding behind another pillar, besides Juno's unconscious body.
You too shall know the pain of death.
Davide took off both of his gloves. A moment later, he kicked off the floor. In seconds, his huge bear-like body was inches from Rosario. Glowing with the heat of a furnace, Davide swung for her with his red-hot hand. But before the fist could touch her, Rosario struck his wrist and redirected the attack. He missed. Without saying a word, she deflected the following attack, too. Rosario said she had acquired info on the agents she teamed up with, and that included Davide's fighting style, apparently. Watching her, I felt pretty damn grateful she was on our side. Using my keyboard, I slipped into the building systems again. As soon as I could, I turned off the entrance lights. The surroundings were instantly covered in darkness. A little light coming from the door, but it wasn't even enough to see anyone else's.
Rosario, now!
I'd only given her one order. Attack Ronan when the lights go out. I heard the crack of a gunshot. Someone collapsed and I turned the lights back on. Momo gasped. She was looking at Rosario, who lay on the ground. There was a hole in her head. The light had faded from her eyes, but they were still fixed on her target, the agent, Ronan. Not even as he lowered his gun did Ronan's expression change. He was the one who shot Rosario in the darkness.
Rosario?
Momo knew the plan, but her heart ached seeing Rosario like this. I felt the same.
Now it's our turn.
I opened the load screen and made ready to flee this reality. Her allies hiding behind the pillars, Rosario stood ready to protect them from the agents.
You too shall know the pain of death.
Davide took off both gloves and kicked off the ground.
Burn.
He raced towards Rosario at an inhuman speed, then threw a punch with his superheated fist. Davide's onslaught was brutal, but Rosario countered every one of his attacks. As the battle raged on, Pollon, still hidden, hacked the building and switched out the lights.
Rosario, now!
Intense sounds echoed through the dark. The room lit up as suddenly as it had darkened, and Momo looked on, perplexed at Davide lying on the ground. He'd been shot in the head. Thoroughly dumbfounded, Ronan lowered his gun. His face had lost its composure. His eyes were wide open and his breathing was strained.
I shot you.
In your predictions, at least.
What do you know?
That you are not long for this world.
Ronan took out his input device. It was a cryptex reminiscent of a pipe puzzle. He started rotating its dials.
He's recalculating!
He won't.
Rosario trained her gun on the hooded agent, but Ronan fired first. He missed. His face turned pale the moment he realized what he'd done.
Recalculate.
He hid behind a pillar, but Rosario was on him. At point-blank range, she pulled the trigger. Ronan dodged the shot, but barely. That meant he'd finished recalculating in time. He fired back. Right between Rosario's eyes, where he'd aimed, or was where he'd aimed at least. Moments before he fired, she grabbed Ronan's arm and threw off his aim.
Impossible. This isn't a computation error. The future has changed?
So his app's real. At least if your panicking is anything to go by.
App? What are you talking about?
Who knows?
Ronan fired off round after round. By twisting her body and using her gun to redirect Ronan's, Rosario dodged every shot. Her breathing was steady, her body relaxed. The same composed smile that graced Ronan's lips earlier was playing across Rosario's now.
How? How can you change the future?
Those who know the future can change it. That's all there is to it.
Ronan pulled the trigger with a desperate aggression. But this time the gun was silent. Consumed by panic, he hadn't realized he was out of ammo.
I refuse to accept this future.
Don't worry. You don't have to. Because you won't be part of it.
Ronan collapsed as the bullet burst from the back of his head. His lifeless face was warped in shock. Superintendent General, Secretary General Nimura, and the Superintendent Vice General sat in the office. Okay, why don't we stop it there? This is Apostrophe. You've been watching Anonymous Code running on Nintendo Switch. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed watching. I will see you at the next stream.